Hey, it's Marissa from Attio. Today we're going to walk through the various records and list workflow blocks. These are some of the most common blocks that are used to modify and create data in your records or lists within Attio. We've run through the different record and list trigger blocks in a previous video, so for this one we'll jump straight into the action blocks. For both records and lists, there are workflow blocks for creating data, creating records, including first checking to see if a record already exists and updating the existing one if it does, creating list entries, finding records or list entries, updating records or list entries, and then also to delete list entries. We're going to start with a commonly used workflow as an example here that lets team members easily create a deal record related to a company. Let's say a sales rep has just finished a qualification call with a new potential customer and they want to go ahead and create a deal to begin tracking the sales process for that company. This workflow is going to be triggered on a company record, so it's very easy when you're finishing up a call to go onto that company record and create a new deal as a follow-up from that call. The first thing that we'll do in this workflow is create a deal record, so we'll choose a create record block. When creating a new record, the first thing you'll want to choose is the type of object that you want to create. In this case, we're creating a deal. The variables for any create or update blocks will be all of the attributes associated with the object type or the list that you're creating or editing in. For this example, we'll populate the relevant attributes for setting up a new deal. We'll give it a name. For this, I'll use a variable from the company that we triggered the workflow off and insert its name. I'll also add new business here so that we know what type of deal it is. And this is a new deal, so we'll add it to the qualification stage. Because this workflow is triggered by a record command block, it must be manually triggered by a user. This means that one of the variables provided in these manually triggered workflows is triggered by, and that will be the user who actually kicked off the workflow. So we want to assign the owner of this deal to be that user. And finally, the associated company will be the company that we triggered the workflow on, so I'm selecting record. For the next step in this workflow, we'll show how to use the update record block. In this case, to update the company to reflect the fact that they are now in our pipeline. The object that we want to update is companies. Now that we are updating an existing record, as opposed to creating a new one like we did earlier for the deal, we need to select the record that we want to update. For this, it is the company that the workflow was triggered on, so record, and then record again. In the update record block, you can choose the specific attributes that you want to provide new values for. In this case, the only thing that we're going to update is the company status attribute. And now that we've created a deal for this company, the value for this attribute is in pipeline. Let's publish this workflow and see it run. So I'm going to select a company to trigger the workflow on and clicking Run the Create Deal from Company workflow. Now, if we head over to that company record page, we can see a new business deal has been created and associated to the company, and the company's new status is in pipeline. Another example we'll run through in this video is how to manage inbound leads from a form submission. This workflow is triggered when a Typeform is submitted. Typeform is one of Attio's native integrations, and to use the trigger block, you'll need to set up your connection in the Integrations tab of your workspace settings. The first step that we'll want to create for managing these inbound leads in Attio is to ensure that we have a record for the person who filled out the form. Since we don't know whether or not any person who fills out our form already exists in Attio, we'll need to either create a new record or update an existing record. We'll select this block and use people as the object type. The create or update block requires a matching attribute, which is a unique value that you'll use to look up whether a record already exists. In this case, the form requires that the person provides their email address, and so we will attempt to match it to the email address of an existing person in Attio. Now, the email address that we're using will be the one that was provided in the form. Once we've either identified an existing person to update our record for, or identified that there isn't a record and chosen to then create a new person record, we can supply other attributes to populate with data. In addition to email address, this form also asks for a person's name and phone number, so we'll use variables to add these values to the relevant attributes. Now that we have a record for the person who filled out the form, whether that's a new one we just created or an existing one that we updated, we can go ahead and add that person to a list where we store all of our inbound leads. So we'll select the Add Record to List block and choose the list, which is our inbound leads list. You'll first choose which record you want to add, which in this case is the one from one step prior. And now I'm going to populate the two attributes from my list, which is the stage and the lead source. I'm using a fixed value for my stage, and then for lead source, I'm pulling in the answer from the "How did you hear about us?" question on the form. Now let's test this workflow out. I'll grab a person that I know already exists in Attio, and I'll show you what this update looks like. You'll notice that there is no phone number for this person currently. I'm taking this user's email address and will submit it to my form. Now I'll submit and head back to Attio. We can see that their phone number has now been populated, and if we go over to our list, we can see that they've been added to our inbound leads list with the lead source that was submitted on the Typeform. So that concludes our 2 examples in this video, showing you how you can create new records or list entries and update existing ones in your workflows.